If you've been watching Thomas the Tank Engine Friends for long enough, you would know so much about the series has changed over the years. I mean, just look at it now compared to what the TV show started as. Obviously, any show is going to change quite a bit, but most of these changes are not received pretty well. And there's a lot of factors that could be blamed for it, whether it be company buyouts or rebrands, but I think the biggest thing always blamed for where Thomas changed was Thomas and the Magic Railroad, the franchise's first theatrical film, and admittedly not a very good one at that. This was the most drastically different thing from the Thomas franchise we'd seen up to this point. Magic was introduced, we had this over the top bad guy, and it's not to say these aspects are inherently bad, but it feels so altered compared to where the show was. Or does it? What if I were to tell you that before Magic Railroad came out, there were slight shifts in the show that were leading indirectly to Magic Railroad? Honestly, I don't think there's any exact way to lead right into Magic Railroad, no matter how you slice it. However, as the series was going on, you could slowly start to see the show shift and change into what we know it as now, before Magic Railroad even came out. So join me as we look back at the episodes I think truly changed Thomas forever and how they impacted the show going forward. With the 6 years Thomas and Friends spent off the air in between seasons 2 and 3, a lot had changed. You could tell they had gotten a lot more clean with its visual effects, and another big aspect that would change the storytelling. They were no longer locked to Audrey's stories. You see, now this expands them to have the creative freedom to make their own episodes. But in reality, they mainly just stole a bunch of magazine ones and didn't credit Andrew Brenner, but hey, that's besides the point. And the main culprit of this significant shift would have to go to Season 3, Episode 6, Thomas Gets Bumped. Now, Thomas Gets Bumped internally is a pretty standard Thomas episode otherwise, honestly probably one of the more forgettable ones, but this episode did change the game in the sense that they no longer had to adapt Audrey stories. This was the first episode they did without any Audrey involvement at all. This definitely let the show change what kind of stories it could tell. No longer are they restricted by what Wilbert or Christopher want to say. Now if Britt Allcroft or David Mitten want to say something, they really can. If they want Henry in that forest without following Rule 55, then he can do it. Heck, I would even say a lot of the adaptions were affected too. I mean, just look at the Railway series adaptation Tender Engines. This episode has so many changes to the original book, and now this gave them a lot more creative freedom across the show, and that they could make any changes to these characters and relationships that they wanted to, and Thomas Gets Bumped is the catalyst. Finally, Thomas Gets Bumped has some sort of significance. While Season 3 made a lot of changes and went in a very different direction, it seemed like Season 4 had the exact opposite decision. How about we try to go back to what Audrey liked about them and make closer adaptations? For the most part, I would say the batting average of Season 4's adaptations are probably stronger than Season 3's in terms of how accurate they are to the book. They're a lot closer to the core meanings of them, and they don't take any real drastic swings. However, there's one elephant in the room. One episode that decided to change a whole character's backstory. Season 4, Episode 15, Stepney Gets Lost. This episode in particular really shifted how the real world would be handled in Thomas and Friends. As in, there wouldn't really be a real world. Instead, Sodor is treated a lot more fictionally. Real world engines and locations are never named, and suddenly everything is feeling a little more fictional with this episode, especially the fact that there's a whole narrow gauge line that goes all the way to the mainland, which just doesn't seem practical. I want you to keep this in mind, though. I am somebody who does like this episode. I think it's a pretty good episode, very well made, and looks amazing. But even I'm like, yeah, the real world connection was completely cut here, and changing Stepney's whole origin so drastically that I could totally see why fans would get upset about this. And really, it did shift the show forever. Real life locations basically just don't apply to the TV show. They're never acknowledged. The mainland is used instead of England, and really, it's just lost that real world connection for the most part with this episode. And Season 5 would go in a really different direction. No more Audrey stories, they said. Now we're going to make wholly original stories, along with a few other stolen magazine stories, but not as much as last time. But they did still try to keep it in the spirit for a while, having an actual railway consultant make sure the episodes could feel real, and basing a lot of those episodes on actual events. However, this does not apply to every episode. There are quite a few that feel a bit more out there, pushing the bounds of what Thomas could be, and shifting it for a potential movie. And I think of all the episodes this season, there's one that sticks out as being quite outlandish, quite out there, that it forever changed how this series would operate. And just prior to Magic Railroad 2, with Season 5, Episode 25, Rusty and the Boulder. Now, if you know me, this is without a doubt my favorite episode of Thomas the Tank Engine, period. I made a whole ranking every episode of Thomas video, and I put this one at number 1. However, this episode definitely showed quite a shift the series would take. Like, for example, we have the introduction of Thumper, who has no character and only appeared in this one episode. He kinda sounds like a toy character. Rusty is also being chased down by a giant boulder, and wouldn't it be fun if they made a toy where the boulder is chasing your engine? I think you see where I'm going with this. This episode feels like one giant ad for a toy. Now, that's also not to say this episode has no deeper meanings. Like, there is this whole theme about, like, how much should man be involved with nature. However, it's very buried in, like, the fun action, the pointless toy character, the sense that this episode is made so that your kid will buy a toy. Yeah, I can admit all these things and still call it my favorite episode, but really, it did start showing the signs of toy episodes that we would start getting an influx of the further the show kept going. Again, I want to make it clear, I do love this episode, but I can't deny this episode is quite outlandish and really pushed the bounds of what a Thomas episode could be. So much to a point where a movie about magic in this franchise, where that's not really a thing, can exist. Now, I gotta reiterate, the point of this video was not to say these episodes are bad because they shifted Thomas. If anything, I think it shows the opposite is true. A great episode could still change the show forever. And I love seasons 3 through 5 as much as the next guy, but you do slowly start to see the shift towards the Magic Railroad period, and really even the hit entertainment run onwards, through these episodes. I also wanted to prove that it's not just one movie or one buyout, or I guess two in this case, that changed the show forever. And really, Britt and David were able to tell great stories the further the show went on. Like, I love episodes like Henry's Forest, like Rusty to the Rescue, like Rusty and the Boulder, Toby and the Flood, more outlandish episodes that push the bounds of what Thomas could be, further away from the Audrey stuff. And really, the point is, more wilder, out there stuff that doesn't fall in line with the Audrey's visions can still be really good. It's always more about the execution. The reason a lot of the Hit and Mattel stuff failed was because, well, the execution was pretty poor, and it didn't feel like they had as much passion for it and wanted to treat it as a cheap, generic brand. David and Britt actually had visions for what they wanted to say and do, and that's why I think those personally just came out better. Just remember, even if your story is a little wild, a little out there, and pushing the bounds of realism, your Thomas story could still be really good. It's just all about the execution at the end of the day, not necessarily the concept. And thank you all for watching, and tell me what you think of this video below. Take care.